Francisco. He is a long-term survivor and has been doing kind of social work with the community in San Francisco for years and years and years. And he does a wonderful program called Honoring Our Experience. And I will begin to try to explain to you what it is. It's an amazing experience that you're about to experience. So without further ado, you're all warmed up.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, Anna. Okay, that was my warm welcome. Thank you, Jeff. I'm wondering how many people were here, was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago for the reunion project. How many people were here? Oh, nice. Excellent. Okay. And I'm curious to know, how many folks are regulars at the Palm Springs events, like the Let's Kick Ass stuff and the stuff that Jeff does? And how many are regulars? Great. And how many people, I'm going to introduce myself in a minute, but I always like to know, like, who's here? How many people are coming to an event like this for long-term survivors for the first time? Would you raise your hands? Wait a minute, how is that possible? Because you all raise your hands for the other stuff. Raise your hands anyway. If you're coming to stuff for long-term survivors for the first time, raise your hand. Oh my God, this is so great. And so how many people in this room, which this is, I just have to say, this is my thing. Like when you've like found your people, like, so several years ago, I decided to create this program for long-term survivors. And the first time I walked into a room full of people that identified as long-term survivors, it was like, I just felt like we all sat down and we just like did this big, deep breath, like, oh my God, that feels so great. So how many people identify as long-term survivors? Raise your hands. Beautiful. So I want to thank you. You're so obedient. It's like Catholic school. Jesus Christ. Ask if you go to the bathroom. You ask. Don't just walk out and think you're all grown-ups. Just ask first. So let me tell a little bit of my story, just so that we know who's here. My name is Gregg Cassin. I moved out to California in 1980. I thought it just needed about 3,000 miles between me and my parents when I came out of the closet. Just wanted the safe distance. And so I moved. I was going to Boston College, and I finished there, and I moved out to California. Through the good graces of my spiritual advisor, who, when I said, do you think I have, he was a closeted Jesuit priest, and I said, do you think I have a vocation? He was like, I think you're moving to San Francisco. So I was like, thank you very much. Thank you, Father. And he was like kicking open the bird cage and saying, fly, girl. So he stayed back there and remained in the closet. Of course, several years later, I saw him. He gave me the obligatory kiss on the lips. That was waiting, so it was exciting. So I got to come to San Francisco in 1980, and probably a year after I arrived in San Francisco, I think it was 81 or 82. How many people lived in San Francisco in the early 80s? Well, you did. How many people were in San Francisco in 1980? Oh my God. Before. Beautiful. Okay, good. So then tell me, how many of you remember the sign hanging in the window of Star Pharmacy? So shortly after I moved to San Francisco, I'm walking to Castro and 18th Street, and there was a Star Pharmacy. And they were just like in the movies and shown in some documentaries, there was a little photocopy of a few Polaroid photos that were pictures of someone who had chaos lesions on their torso, on their arms, and they didn't show their whole face. And then it was like their open mouth with these chaos lesions. And I remember being like, oh my God, it was like a kick in the groin. I said, this is going to touch my life. I found out that I was positive, I think 1985. And of course it changed my life. And the work that I do, so when I started several years ago, I spent years on disability. How many people spent years or are on disability now? Raise your hands. Okay, good. So I'm asking personal questions. So this is just us, okay? Just pretend it's like this little cozy room. It's soundproof. I'm not on a microphone. I think it's so important. one of the things that I do with my work, so I'll go back. I found out in 1985. In 1989, I started a group called the Healing Circle. And the Healing Circle was this group where, people ask me, what do you do? And I never have a good sound bite. I was asked one time, I was on the Pause cruise, and this lesbian bus driver from Minneapolis, she's like, so what do you do? And because I was presenting there, and I'm fumbling, and she's like, so how long have you been doing this? I said, about 25, 30 years. She's like, in 25, 30 years, you should have gotten your elevated pitch. And I was like, shut up. It was so rude. Tough lesbian. She tells you what you need to do. So, right? Get in line, Gregg Cassin. So I haven't developed my elevator pitch, but I want to say that in 1989, I started this group called the Healing Circle, which was this incredible opportunity for people to come together when we had no treatments, we had no medications, and really when we still were reaching towards so many places for assistance. And in the early days of the epidemic, we realized that we kept reaching out, and we finally realized that we only had ourselves to rely on, right? It was those days where all of a sudden it was like, it's just us. And I feel like that is one of the most powerful moments in this history of the epidemic, was when we recognized that it was up to us. And then when we recognized that we were so capable. Like, how many people remember, what an incredible response, what an incredibly noble response we had to the epidemic, what an incredibly inspired response we had to the epidemic. So in 1989, I started this group called the Healing Circle, where this will be a test of who the old timers are. How many people remember Louise Hay? I love this. We're 5 minutes away from walkers and everything. This is fantastic. This many people that remember Louise Hay. So if anybody, I've never done this before. Would anybody like to do a brief introduction of who Louise Hay is for the crowd? Because it would be so much fun to hear someone else's take on it. And this is AIDS history. So listen up, children. If you haven't heard about AIDS, you come in, it's like grandpa's in front of the fireplace. He's opening the big book the night before Christmas, the night of AIDS. So who would like to say who Louise Hay was? Please, someone. Don't be shy.
I love myself the way I am.
I love myself the way I am. So someone say some more. Okay, I'm going to tell a story about Louise Hay. Thank you. So Louise Hay, in the early days of the epidemic, she was this woman that she just recently passed, right? Just like a few months or a year ago or something like that. So years ago, when there was no treatment, she was one of these people down in Los Angeles that was courageous enough to start a support group for people with HIV. And I'm going to tease myself and her a little bit in my story, because she was very controversial, right? There were people that hated Louise Hay's work, right? Because some people there were the folks from ACT UP, and then there were folks that went to the Healing Circle. So I see the kids from ACT UP were the people that sat in the back of the bus, and they shot spitballs at the people that went to the Healing Circle. They were the cool kids in the back of the bus. They were hanging out at Cafe Flora. They had black leather jackets, and I was sitting in the front with a lavender t-shirt on and a crystal in my pocket and a book on how to love myself. And of course, we only go to the experts. Louise Hay was basically an ex-model, and you go to the source. If you're looking to survive an epidemic, who do you go to but the ex-model? So, but she started these groups where people came together to practice loving themselves. It sounds corny, but the work that was considered so corny back in that day now is research work. The power of social connection, the power of a loving community, right? The folks that have been coming to these groups and stuff, or that have been doing that kind of work, or recognize the life-saving work you do by coming together as a community and recognizing that not only are you coming for yourself, but you're coming for the guy or the woman next to you. It's one of the things that I talk about all the time when I'm within my group, that when you come tonight, you're coming for yourself, but you have no idea what the person sitting next to you is carrying. And you have no idea of the healing that you can provide a person solely by having them felt heard and understood, right? So I want to tell my little funny Louise Hay story, and then we'll get a chance to meet each other. So in the old days, and I think it was at the time when I was living with my friend Will here. Will, why don't you raise? And everyone say hi, Will. Hi, Will. So wave to them, Will. Let them see who you are. Will, I just seen for the first time in maybe 8 years. I just want to say the whole day now with Will is going to be a forgiveness process because he looks about 8 years younger than I saw him 8 years ago. So everyone that looks like that, you're like, son of a bitch, what did he do? So I had a partner named Matthew Wick, and so he came to me one day, and this was in the day of, I don't know if anyone was doing like the very new agey stuff. Like to me, it was all new agey stuff. Like there was no treatment, and I had to find a way to live. So my boyfriend at the time came to me, and he's like, oh, you have to read this. This is incredible. And I'm like, what is it? And he goes, oh, it's a science fiction book. And I'm like, like if you're a follower of Louise Hay, I was like, no, I only read positive things. So he's like, well, he goes, you read Louise Hay. He goes, that's kind of science fiction. So I was like, son of a. So the book that he wanted me to read, I forget the name of the author, but this is the section. He's like, no, you got to read this. And we're going to do a little thing where we welcome one another, and I want it to be in this spirit. He said, read this because it's this community of people. It was a science fiction book where the planet was kind of falling apart, and they needed to venture out and to find a new place to create their civilization. So they were going and traveling from planet to planet, trying to find a place to then set up their new community. And they come upon this place where there's this very unique set of beings, and they're called the harmoniums. And they're called the harmoniums for a reason. He said, they're so unusual. There's no way in which one creature can harm one another and no motive for harming another. Hunger, envy, ambition, fear, indignation, religion, sexual lust are all irrelevant and unknown. These creatures have only one sense, touch. They have only two possible messages. The first is an automatic response to the second, and the second is an automatic response to the first. He said, as these two beings come and greet one another, their hands go up, they touch, they look at each other, and they say, here I am, here I am, here I am. And the only possible response is so glad you are, so glad you are, so glad you are. So in that spirit this morning, I want to take, where's that guy with the sound? Aaron, you up there? Hi. So we're going to turn on some music. What I want to say is, what I'd like us to do for this moment is to warm up the room by standing up, and we're going to welcome one another. And I want it to be with this spirit of like as if you're welcoming an old friend. That we stand up, we move around, and we give some hugs and some handshakes and do little introductions and meet somebody. Who are the new people for the first time? Raise your hand. Okay, so you got a lot of work to do. Okay, so everybody, I want this place to be beaming with freaking love and sunshine in the next 3 minutes, okay? So everybody stand up and welcome one another. Okay, say hello to me. Hi, my dear. Thank you. No, I remember.
No, I wasn't seeing that.
Okay, now let's come back. Let's come back. Let's come back and let's bring it in a little bit. I need to be louder. Let's come on in. Come in close. Do me a favor. Come in a little bit closer because we're going to do another thing where we have to be near one another.
No.
Come on in. Okay, crowd. Come in a little bit closer. You guys come over. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. It's just HIV. Don't be shy. Come on. Okay, it's nice if you have a problem getting them to stop hugging each other. That's a good sign. Good. Okay. So, there's a few things. Oh, maybe that's why we couldn't hear me. Thank you. It's Madonna, 95. Let's do this. I'm going to read a little piece here. We learned from the earliest days of the epidemic that our greatest strength is one another. By facing HIV, by joining together as one community, sharing our stories, bearing witness to one another, being inspired by each other's courage and resilience is profoundly healing. So many of the challenges of HIV can lead to isolation, loneliness, grief, or shame. But we can change that through the power of coming together. By joining, we not only have the opportunity to heal ourselves, but to heal one another. We make that difference by being together and listening. So I was starting to tell the story of I went on disability for a slew of years, and I went on disability because the organization that I was running was falling apart, and the little HIV nonprofit. And at the same time, a guy came into my life who had a partner, who had a child. His partner had passed away, and he had a 6-year-old daughter. And we met at a conference where I was facilitating this thing. And I have to say, I choose my partners by what kind of a beautiful crier they are. And he was like the best crier in the room. He was sitting in the corner. It wasn't an ugly face. It was like pretty with like the tears streaming down. And it was like, and I just like felt this guy like, oh my God, what's going on with him? And I was in Denver. I had to be there for several days. We wound up spending some time together. And then we totally did a lesbian love affair where by the end of a long weekend, we were deciding who's moving. 3 days. Okay, so Queens, we got to catch up. They do it in 3 days. Okay, they give the 30-day notice, they pay double rent, and then they move. So I had. What was the point of that? What was I telling you? How did I start? Say it again? Okay. Yeah. So I went on disability, and then, I wanted to tell you about starting the group with long-term survivors. So I had been on disability, and I'd been doing work with a group called AIDS Medicine and Miracles, and I was traveling around the country with this conference. And how many people heard that or ever went to AIDS Medicine and Miracles? It was did you? I heard of it. Yeah. So I was working with AIDS Medicine and Miracles, doing stuff like as a volunteer, and this man came into my life. And so over a 3-day weekend, I became a partner and a parent of a 6-year-old girl. So I decided to go on disability and to be a full-time parent, and I became like the soccer mom, driving her to soccer and to ballet classes and all that stuff. And the whole time that I was on disability, I was feeling like I had more work to do. And it wasn't until seeing the film We Were Here. How many know that film? How many saw We Were Here? It's incredible. If you can make a note to yourself or remind one another, there's a movie called We Were Here that interviews maybe 7 people with HIV that lived through the epidemic in San Francisco. And they're long-term survivors. Some are negative, a woman that was a nurse during the day. And it is an amazing, amazing film. And I saw that at the Castro Theater. Now, one of the things that happened with the epidemic, I felt like I think that many of us feel like that HIV has been put on this back burner and has become this forgotten thing, right? So many of it feels like, what happened to all that education, all the attention that was being paid to it? So I went to the Castro Theater for the opening of this film. It was packed, and it looked like this crowd. It was like older HIV positive queer people and straight allies and folks, and all in there together. And when they told their stories of the early days of the epidemic, it was like a bell had been rung of, it's time to talk about this. So I want to say that in working on the idea of doing this retreat, honoring our experience, I was reading a lot of stuff, and I found this one. It was either an article or a research paper that likened these mass traumatic events, such as, I know it's not the same, but in its similarity of the Holocaust, of being this profound traumatic experience of a huge community of people, that they said that in the days of following the Holocaust, in the decades with the survivors, that they went for 10 or 20 years before being able to discuss the Holocaust. And I felt like in my community what I saw, that people lived through the epidemic, that many of us white-knuckled during the time of the epidemic, and then kind of held on and started rebuilding our lives, or like maintaining our lives, and then realizing that the dust had settled and that time had gone by, where all of a sudden we felt like, did that really happen? It was so many of us that said, isn't it hard to believe that that really happened? What was it like to be losing 2 or 3 friends, or a month or a year or a week, some of us, when we're 25 years old? So I decided that I wanted to start this group to bring together people that have this unique and profound experience of this great, great loss, of this shared great loss. And so I started this thing called Honoring Our Experience. And I want to do something that we do at every one of the retreats several times, is we recognize that we walk into a place like this when we come into the retreat, that we come in alone, but we come in, and the most important thing that can take place in this room is to connect with one another and realize the profoundly healing power of us leaning in and joining and connecting with one another. So I want to take a moment and do this meditation. So take a deep breath, and we're going to ask you to take the hand of the people on either side of you. Now we're really in California, girls. There are people that complain when I call us girls. I'm very sorry, but I'm from a certain generation where that is great. Okay, so let's take a nice deep breath together. Take and release. Close your eyes. We started. Nice. And just in this space, we know that nobody is alone. That in this space, nobody is left behind. That we walk into this space and know that we are seen, and in some way that we are known. There is a group of people gathering that are committed to creating community, mutual support, leaving no one behind, opening their hearts and being part of the healing. Bring any shyness or self-doubt as your gift to be offered up. We all walk into this room wanting the same thing, to be seen by another and to see another. Seen as in felt, heard, understood, held, treasured. And in this being seen, healed, that's the power we have for one another. We hold the hands of the people on either side of us, but we hold the hearts of every person in this room. We hold the hearts and all that these hearts contain. We hold the unfathomable losses. We hold years of isolation, of fear. We hold the memories of those we love. And if we hold these hearts, so must our heart be held. For this moment, for this brief time, allow this room, this circle of brothers and sisters, to hold your heart. That we walk through this together. No one left behind. Let's feel the hands that we're holding. Take another deep breath. Let's just open our eyes. And let's just take a moment just to connect with the people on either side of us and just say a few words to them again. So, thank you. So, I want to take a moment to who are some of the people that have been like helping Jeff with putting together. Uh, so I want to just acknowledge that. Thank you. I want to acknowledge that there were some folks that were wiping away their tears, and I want to show a friend of mine. His name was Dan Martell. Wrote a poem. And I use this at every retreat because we shed tears. We do a lot of laughing, but we shed a lot of tears. And this guy wrote this poem, and he wrote, "Our tears are liquid prayers." It's just the greatest. It's just the greatest mission. And I also like to say, like, and if your mascara is running, that's freaking awesome. It's awesome. And it means you use the expensive stuff, because they said the really cheap stuff from Walgreens is like goes on like a Sharpie, but the expensive stuff just comes all the way down. So if you're black all over, it just means like you're probably using Lancome or something fabulous. So I want to just ask us to do some of the work of hearing one another's stories. I want to go back to the incredible importance of recognizing that the work that we're doing when we come together like this is life-saving work. It's like the work that's being done in NA and AA, where we realize that our shares are saving our lives, that connecting and telling our truth, being seen and being heard, having our stories witnessed, make all the difference in the world. And it is building that kind of a social network, that kind of a social support network. So I want to let me ask some questions before we start some sharing, and to give some honest answers. How many people over the course of this epidemic, how many people have dealt with depression? Raise your hands. It's so powerful this year, right? Thank you. How many people have dealt with isolation and loneliness? Raise your hands. It's epidemic. It's epidemic. We're at a round table now across the room where people that are from all different parts of the country that work with or are long-term survivors, and we're creating this whole kind of plan for, I don't even know what the hell you call it. What do you call it, Lynn? Like this kind of plan for how do we ask the country, like organizations, et cetera, to respond to long-term survivors and the special needs of long-term survivors. And then one of the things we say, okay, how many people feel like they deal with or have dealt with incredible stigma as a result of a diagnosis? Raise your hands. Powerful, right? We feel like one of the biggest hurdles, I think there's two major hurdles, and it's the role of stigma and the role of isolation, of like this, and depression, of like actually making connections. I want to acknowledge something. When I first started doing the groups 4 years ago with long-term survivors, there was so much fear around connection that we actually had to have this kind of conversation and say, like, and how many people in truth are really coming to this group to leave with a new friend, that over a period of time to have a new friend? And everyone raised their hands, and I was like, and how many people feel afraid about that? Everyone raised their hands. So one of the things we had to address is, it is completely understandable that we would be afraid, hesitant, or maybe even terrified, having the loss that we have experienced, the traumatic loss and the multiple losses, that we would be timid to enter into those kind of friendships again. And so it was work that we did of trusting ourselves and rebuilding friendships. We did work towards having that kind of courage. So this is what I want to ask. How many people, let's go through some of our losses. How many people lost a partner during the epidemic? Would you raise your hands? Wow. Okay. How many people lost two partners? So I want to completely feel, so when we're doing this, that everybody is, that when we're all holding you up, when you're holding your hands. How many people lost over 2 partners? How many people lost 3 partners? Thank you. How many people lost a best friend? I was just riding in the van with this woman. I want to welcome in the women in this group, the allies and the positive women in this group. I was riding in the van, 2-hour thing yesterday, and this woman talked about her best friend that she lost 25 years ago as if it was yesterday. How many people have that friend that you lost that is this space of like, fuck, life would be so much better with that person, right? Like how many of us that you think like, oh. So how many people lost 2 of their best friends or 3? Like, yeah. And so then I want to go to how many people felt like they lost their entire circle of friends. How many people are the last men or the last person standing? It was the friends that they had Thanksgiving dinner with, that they went on vacation with, and they plan to grow old with. Raise your hands. And hold those hands up. I just want us to see that. Unfathomable losses where people feel like, I won a booby prize. I lived, but everybody that I loved died. It's a horror story. But it is possible. I promise. It's totally possible to reestablish a circle of friends. I've seen it happening in San Francisco. Guys that were leaving the house to go to get their groceries at Project Open Hand 1 day a week and never going out in between there. And now with having come to the retreats and going to regular, and the AIDS Foundation started this weekly dinners and then movies and stuff. People are coming together. These guys that were completely lonely and so afraid are like these mad queens, like teenage 16-year-old girls that are doing selfies in front of movie theaters, at restaurants and everything. The bitches don't stay home. They're like out all the time and have built a circle of friends. It's incredible what's possible if we take that risk. I want to ask, how many people work or worked in the HIV field? Raise your hands. Or as volunteers also, raise your hands. See everybody. So how many people? Holy shit. Okay. Thank you. 6 minutes. So you know what? Then I want to get right to sharing our stories. So I want to hear from people. I want to hear whatever you feel like you'd like to share. One of the things I'm thinking is I want us to think of during the day today. One of the things we do over and over again at the end of retreats and at the end of workshops, I ask people to be mindful during the day of when someone is touching you, when someone is saying something that is inspiring or something that moves you, something that helps you. Because I want us to practice recognizing that being with one another makes a difference, that we are contributing something, we are giving something, as well as receiving when we come together like this. I think it's so important. And at the end of the day, we'll do this thing where I'll ask people to acknowledge people across the room. Like, when you said this, that really touched me, or when this happened, that really touched me. So we only have 5 minutes. So I want to take a few moments. I would love some people to be brave enough to share a little bit of their stories. And I think it would maybe something around what it is, like them coming back to the fold, coming back to one another. So are some people ready to share? Can someone raise their hands and tell me that? Yay! God bless you. Give me that damn microphone. Thank you. Thank you. And you introduce yourself, and everyone's going to say hello to you. You're going to get healed. It's incredible.
Hi, my name is Doug Campbell, and
Doug, say hi, Doug.
I was diagnosed in 1986. I've had AIDS for 32 years. When I first got diagnosed, my partner at the time died 2 years later from mostly AZT overdose, because they were unfamiliar with the medicines at that time. And I held off on the medicines until my T cells dropped to 152, and then I was diagnosed with AIDS. Since then, during the first 3 years, I lost 30 people in the first 3 years, and friends. We were always going to funerals all the time. I now have a lover for 15 years, and it's great because I've lost 3 lovers, and the Black Widow. The Black Widow, exactly. Exactly.
She sleeps with one eye open.
Exactly. But I feel really blessed now that thank God for DAP. They've really saved my life.
Good.
And I have great medical care. I have great insurance, and let somebody else speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. I want to hear who else? Thank you. And I want to hear from some people like from somebody who's coming in to a group like this for the first time, and to share like, what do you need? Because I want to say, like, when we come, we're needing to be connection. We're needing friendship. We need to break out of the isolation. And it's so powerful to hear and to be reminded that it's possible, that we really can do that for one another. So be thinking and don't be cheap. I want to say something about this. The power in a group like this, like it is in every program, is the power is share. And I don't mean share like, I mean share. Share, it is by definition, it is an act of generosity. You have to, for these groups to work, for your community to work, you have to be willing to share, to be vulnerable. It's the way home. It's the way to one another. Yay.
Good morning. My name is Bob. And earlier we asked about, the depression and the isolation. What I remember in the early days was the fear, not so much the isolation and depression, but I was diagnosed in one of the first tests, 1984. And it came about because where I worked, it was all the rage back then. They were trying to do T-cell counts to get group insurance at work. They required you to take a T-cell count, and I fought it and took them to court, and I didn't have to do it. But that got me, I went and got my own test later and found out in 1984 that I was positive. But it was fear during that time of not knowing what's going to happen. That's what I remember.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any women here that would like to share? Anybody want to share? I'm going to look around. I'm going to make eye contact, but I'm not going to call on you unless you raise your damn hand. Anybody? He's elbowing you. Is it you? Okay. She says, I know he is. Okay, so who else would like to share? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Thomas.
Hi, Thomas.
And I moved to the desert back in September because my partner of 21 years, we both survived the plague. We both survived all of it. And then he got Hep C, and he had a liver transplant. And in his 3-month checkup, he had 7 new tumors in his new liver, and he died 4 weeks later.
Oh my God.
And so I've just been here all alone since then. And I moved here because of all the people, all the folks. I'm 56. The demographics are, you all know the demographics, but the average age of the gay men is 51.9 years old. And so I just came here to live again.
So we all heard that, right? So that is when a person trusts the room enough to put out a clarion call and to say what's in each one of our hearts. I need you. We need one another. Thank you so much for what you're sharing. So remember him. And also, you did pick a great place because you're almost chicken here. So, very wise, very wise. Don't go to San Francisco, the Castro. They're like 11. I'm like, who the fuck are you? Get out of here. You should be on the side of a milk carton. Thank you for what you shared. It's Thomas? Everyone say again, hi, Thomas. Exactly. Okay, I've got a couple of minutes. Shut up. But someone else want to take one more share, please.
Hi, I'm David, and I left California back in '79 and moved to East Tennessee, and I started a gay men's resort. And I was kind of like a pioneer in the resort business, but I kept hearing about people dying in New York and Chicago, San Francisco, and living in the South. I thought, we were exempt from having that happen to us because, we never heard about it in East Tennessee. I ended up being diagnosed in '93, and I had 45 T cells, and my doctor told me that if I didn't leave East Tennessee and go back to Palm Springs, get support, because he said, they have projects where you have support from each other who are HIV, and there's HIV doctors out there. So I finally did leave East Tennessee and sold the business, and I got into crystal meth for about 2.5 years. And
how many people have to slay that dragon? Raise your hands. Yeah, there's a whole sisterhood, huh? Thank you.
And I'm a long-term survivor, and right now I'm dealing with looks like liver cancer. So anyway, but I'm very positive. I love living in Palm Springs, and I know we have great support here in Palm Springs.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for what you just shared. We're here for the whole day. Jill is going to be our next presenter, who I just love. So we're going to be welcoming her in just a few minutes. I want to say thank you. We'll be here later on today. I'll be welcoming Cleve Jones here. He'll be speaking later on this afternoon, and we'll do a Q&A after that. I just want to point out, I do these retreats. I do them 2 times a year in the San Francisco Bay Area. Everyone is welcome. And we're doing another one in October. This one is in April. It's very soon. And then the next one is in October 19th to the 21st. But I'll tell about it later. Take my information. I'll have flyers and stuff like that. I'm really, really grateful. You totally did the Palm Springs welcome. They didn't let me down. They promised, and you delivered. So thank you very much, everybody.
Big hand for Gregg Cassin. Test.